Welcome. You are listening to Haunted Histories on Paranormal UK Radio. And hello and welcome to this issue of Haunted Histories, exclusively for you, available for you on Paranormal UK Radio. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. I hope you're all finding your new normal and getting some kind of routine back in your lives. For those of us in the UK, it's only a couple of weeks before our kids go back to school. That's a 6-month summer holiday they've had. So I put a joke out on Facebook recently that somebody else had shared that said when parents in sort of 20 years' time complain about a 6-week summer holiday and how are they going to get through it, those of us who went through this in 2020 will turn around and say, piece of piss, mate. I can do 6 weeks standing on my head now. After 6 months of summer holiday, basically, I think some of us will be drop kicking our kids back over the school fences to get them back into school and to get them into some kind of routine, because I have a newfound respect for teachers. Teaching ain't easy. Although I do think my kids pay more attention to their teachers than they do to me. But so for those of you who've got kids and for those of you who are teachers, respect, as Aretha would say, or R-E-S-P-C-T, as Aretha would say. Anyway, what have you thought about the last two shows I've done? Have you had a listen? What did you think? If you have got any questions ever to pose to one of my guests, or even to me, something I've been talking about, please do drop me a line on either on the Haunted Histories Facebook page or via my website, the email address on there. Always happy to put the questions to prior guests for you, and I'm sure tonight's guests are going to be no different in agreeing to that, because they're good friends of mine. I've known them now, well, actually since I started podcasting. It's about 3 years since I first spoke to them. I think our first show we were talking very probably Lancaster Castle, seeing as that is their spirit home for these two. And you know what it's like spooky people are like buses. You get one, and then another one comes along very close behind. I can only be talking about the Spooky Sisters from Lancashire. They are Jeanette and Pamela Worley. How you doing, girls?
Hello, good, thank you.
See, I've been trained to pronounce their name wrong, because I always pronounce their name wrong, and they train me not to pronounce it wrong, hence the emphasis on the Worley bit.
We're getting there.
I'll probably forget next time, because I've got a brain like a sieve at the moment. But how you doing, girls?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Good,
yeah.
Hanging in there. Yeah.
Lots of dog walking?
Plenty. Yeah, lots of that. I've been up to Pamela. We've walked the dogs up there a lot, haven't we? Up in the hills, yes, we have.
Yeah. See, one of the sisters is very lucky. She lives in the middle of nowhere. And lots of lovely walks and hills and everything else. And what's unfortunate was when I was in Blackpool earlier this year, I think it was this year, beginning of this year, wasn't it, girls?
Yeah.
And we were due to meet up, but there was they both had personal things happening, which meant we couldn't. And then it was when the floods all happened and we had the torrential rain. And my husband and I literally swam back along the motorway to get back down to Essex. But I'm sure we'll be back again, girls, because we want to go and see the drag show again at some point, because it was just so good.
It's fun.
And my husband has definitely said he wants to visit Lancaster Castle if possible, so we'll be sorting that out at some point in the future.
Sure. Fantastic.
Actually, no, that weekend was also a Steel Panther gig, wasn't it? I think it was in Manchester.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
And did you manage? I know, Jeanette, you managed to make it over there, didn't you?
did manage to make it over there. Yeah, it was very, very difficult, but I got there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't easy.
It wasn't. I mean, what with the winds that weekend, if I remember rightly. I know that at Blackpool they closed I think it was was it the Friday night? We were waiting for the tram to go back to our B&B, and somebody yelled across the road, "Oh, the tram stopped!" And it's like, well, they're not supposed to stop till like 11. No, the wind's too strong, and so trying to queue up to find a taxi, and it was interesting.
Well, all the trains. I arrived at the railway station in Blackpool and found that all the trains had been cancelled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, ended up getting a lift, but even then we got stuck in traffic and stuck for Christ knows how long. It was, it was quite a epic journey, really, to get there.
You still got to see the boys in all their lycra fineness.
Yeah, did do, yeah. Yep.
Right, well, for those of you who don't know the Spooky Sisters, they are, in fact, sisters. There's actually 3 of them, and the third one actually lives in a spooky village in its own right. I think she actually is a tour guide there as well, isn't she, your sister?
She's a tour guide at Chatsworth House.
Yeah.
So 15 minutes away. And also the museum in the village as well. She works there as well.
So you guys have got spooky and history in your blood.
Yes, very much.
Good, it's why we get on. But what we're going to talk about tonight is a place that both of you mentioned to me that you really, really wanted to talk about, and it's a place that I've wanted to go for quite a long time. Sorry, I'm just moving myself around here. It's a place I wanted to go to for quite a long time, and you two sort of said to me, "Oh, please, can we do a show on it at some point?" And I was like, "Of course we can. Of course we can." And that's somewhere in, it always makes me chuckle to say it, but Leek in Staffordshire, called Anzio Army Camp. Now, unfortunately, your last trip that you were due to go there had to be postponed, and at the moment, because of its daytime operations, well, this part of it, I think it's a laser site or something, isn't it? They also hire it out as a Cub Scouts and all that kind of thing go there. It's one of the places that's been impacted by the virus and had to be shut down. But what was the reason that the two of you went there in the first place? What attracted you to the camp?
Good. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Jeanette. Well, we're always interested in, for some reason, RAF bases, army camps, all those, because there's all of them. Yeah. There's quite often you hear about a lot of army bases, RAF camps, and everything that are reputedly haunted because of the history they have. So, in that case, it was just, I've never heard of that, that one before. Got to go now. So that was it, basically.
Yes, and it's so big as well. It's spread over a big area as well, and big events and. And we knew there'd be a lot to see. We knew it hadn't. I don't think it had been done at that stage before by ghost hunting companies at that time.
Right.
Another reason, because we knew, some places can get overdone, can't they? Or you think spirits must get tired and things like that. Yeah. Tired of people. So that was one of the reasons as well.
Okay. Okay. So who was it you went with? Was it a group that you went with, or was it a sort of a crew you put together yourselves?
No, it was a group. It was Chris Conway.
Who? Sorry?
Chris Conway.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And the first time you went there, what sort of ideas, I suppose I could say, did you go there with? Did you have any specific things you were going to try? Any sort of almost preformed ideas about the sort of things you were expecting?
For me, no. Nothing at all. Not heard that much about it.
No.
We went with our Ghost Followers girls. So those 5 of us went together. For me, it was, I don't know about Pamela, but for me, there was no preconceived ideas, no, knowing what we were going to do. I just went open-minded.
Right. We hadn't any history on it, really. We hadn't researched the history on it, because sometimes we like to go into places quite blind and and then you don't get the preconceived ideas, and then when something does happen and then you tie it in later, it makes it more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about this place is there isn't much about it online at all. I mean, I spent 2 or 3 days doing my normal routes of inquiries and everything else, and whether there's stuff on it in the local records office in Staffordshire, I don't know. But with most of the sort of places that had, it's going to sound very, very xenophobic, and it's not meant to, but foreigners coming into the UK in the 40s, there's subsequent newspaper articles on it. That, you know, the fact that East Anglia, for example, which had this whole proliferation of US Air Force bases arrive. There's loads of stuff you can find out about it, but this one, not so much. Most people can find the basic history. The basic history is it was built in 1943 to house US Army, specifically one of the anti-aircraft battalions. It was actually the 565th, according to the notes I found. I then looked to see if they'd done, it sounds awful the way I'm putting it, because they must have been used for stuff, but if they had done anything specific in World War II, and the main sort of association I found is they were involved in the Battle of the Bulge. That specific unit went over there to sort of work on the anti-aircraft over there. In 1946, it started sort of, Polish troops started arriving. And then for the next sort of 20 years or so, it was used as a Polish settlement camp, which is a period I'm quite fascinated by because of what they went through. But then the history says, oh, nothing happened to it. Then in 1983, it was redesigned as what we see now as an army training camp for territorials, scouts, regular army. And then it shut in 2004. There are some discrepancies, though, because I found a few sort of chat pages of people saying, hang on, I was training there in the 70s in the army, so it was still being used. But looking at it, I thought, well, it's not actually that big, Anzio. And so I started digging. It's huge. The site that you get to investigate at Anzio is one of 4 of the camps that was in that sort of area, and they are actually known as the Blackshaw Moor camps, because it's on Blackshaw Moor, near to Leek, near to a place called, and I have to look this at Thorncliffe. But its main usage does seem to have been to do with the Polish resettlement, and which got me thinking, like, why were there so many Poles? And according to the statistics, at one point there was over 130,000 Poles who'd been misplaced. It says misplaced, but that sounds awful because they weren't misplaced. No, people didn't forget who they were. They didn't have a home to go to. Which, whether they'd been, fighting for the Allies and couldn't go back to Poland for whatever reason, or whether they were some of the early ones who left Poland back in 1939. Now, I'm going to give you a quick, very boring history lesson here, but a lot of people don't realise. A lot of people have slated Stalin for siding with Hitler at the beginning of the Second World War. They were saying, oh, he was doing it to be sort of, he's two-faced, we should never have allied with him, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reason he did it was Hitler had come to him and said, look, why don't we divvy up Poland between us? You're the next country. And he got him to sign in 1939 something that's known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was an anti-aggression pact which said, well, you have this part of Poland, I'll have this part of Poland, and I promise I'll never attack Russia. That's kind of a simplified version of what it was all about. But and so there was an awful lot of Poles who sort of were like, oh, crumbs, I don't want to be ruled by the Russians, and they tried to leave. And a lot of them did come to the UK. Obviously, the ones who were ruled by Germany thought, oh, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be great. The Germans are quite good rulers, same as Ukraine when they invaded the Ukraine. And then they found out, well, perhaps the Germans weren't quite as nice as they first thought, and the experience wasn't great. I mean, we all know the places that were in Poland during World War II and things like the Warsaw Uprising and all those kind of things. Now, after it was about, I think it was 1941, when Stalin kind of realised that Hitler had kind of done a turn on what he'd originally agreed. Now, Stalin had placed loads and loads of now Russian Poles, or Soviet Poles, in the gulags in Siberia, including a very well-known general of theirs called General Anders. And he started to realise he had quite a lot of men there who could fight for him. And so he pardoned them and allowed them to fight on behalf of the Allies, and quite a lot of them came to England and other parts of Europe. Italy was a big one for them to go to. So that was the reason we had so many come here, because they'd been released from the gulags in Siberia, but they didn't want to go home because they didn't want to be under Russian rule. Well, German rule almost, as it was becoming. So that's why we had so many. So I just think of the type of emotion that would have been in these places. So you've got these people who've got no home, no families. They don't know what's going to be next for them. They're stateless.
Yeah.
I just wonder what kind of energy, and they were trying to build a new family, like build this new unit at Blackshaw Moor.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder what kind of emotions the place must hold.
Well, it's in emotions, wasn't it? You know, there was so many emotions flying round and soaking into the walls, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That you would imagine it would soak it up.
Yeah, but that's what I sort of wonder, and I think, I mean, they did start families, they did meet people, they did, I mean, you did have women as well as men coming over, and they would take the sort of the Nissen huts and they would divide them into a home. They would put literally a sort of a plywood wall down the middle, and this side would be one family and that side would be another family. And I learned the word for workshop in Polish is worszt, or something, wurst, something along those lines, because there was something in the region of 5 different sites over the whole of the Blackshaw Moor camp. There was like the sapper side, the different camps, the different workshops, and all this kind of thing. And it just makes you realise what a huge site it must have been in the sort of 40s to the 60s. So a lot of people focus on the army side of it, but I wonder if this kind of like the more stateless, these people who had no home address, if that's got more hold on it.
So far away from home, and there's no place like home, and knowing, you know, they were in a foreign land without, stateless.
Yeah,
it certainly feels like it when you're there.
Does it?
Right.
Yeah.
So what kind of feelings did you get when you were there?
Intense. Yeah, like it was as if they'd been waiting for somebody to come along and communicate with them. It was incredible. It was like from the minute you stepped into there, really, and we were in like a big warehouse bit for the base. And from the minute we stepped into there was a feeling of intenseness that it's hard to describe, really. But when we started out on the investigation, it was like we barely had to do anything before spirits were coming through. Yeah, it just felt like they'd been waiting a long time for somebody and communicate in some way.
Right.
It was, we've never felt that intenseness.
No.
Way in a place.
So what sort of things were happening?
Well, go on, Pamela.
Well, at the beginning, they did, you know, like most groups, do a circle, don't they, and call out to the spirits and everything. And we were in, was it the bar area?
Used to be the social place.
Yeah.
With the other dances and everything.
Yeah. It was a big open space, and we were sort of all in a circle, and everyone could feel, you could feel the energy, but there was almost dark figures moving around, and it was like they weren't there to harm us, but they were there. It was felt like they were watching us, saying, "Who are these? Who are these people? You know, here." Like they were interested in why we were there and what we were doing. You could feel it closing in.
Yeah, quite a few people saw shadow figures standing in corners. Yeah, standing in corners and, you know, around behind them, and quite a few, people saw the same ones. And it was like, you know, sometimes you can tell that people aren't making it up. Yeah. And you can feel it yourself. It was like that. It was like there was quite a few in one place.
Right.
Yeah. Just like Pamela says, just observing, just wondering what was going on and who we were.
Right.
You know. So there was that. That was the very start, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah. but I mean, we felt the feelings in the base room right at the beginning, and then moved on to the bar area where things got more intense. But then again, we were in a small. There was just the 5 of us, wasn't there? 4 or 5.
Us and the girls, yeah.
Yeah.
And we split.
Yeah, split into very small groups. And was there a very loud? There was a very loud bang behind us. We couldn't.
It was like something had got thrown onto the floor. It was because it was all like brick and stone floor and everything. It was like something had been thrown onto the floor really, really hard.
Right.
Behind us. And we all turned round, didn't we? And we thought, we were with a big room. We were opposite ends of the room, all 5 of us. And we all span round and we went to have a look because it was very, very dark in there. We went to have a look with our torches and there was just nothing. There was nothing on the floor that it could have been. But we all heard it. All 5 of us heard it. And we're in our group, we all trust each other, faintly like that. But we all heard it. And there was no explanation for it at all. Now, was it something trying to get attention? I don't think it was anything trying to harm us. It didn't feel like.
It didn't feel that way, did it?
No. But it was just, the energy was just, it was palpable in there. It's hard to explain, really, but you'll know yourself because you'll have experienced it in places. Mm-hmm. That's what it's like. Something trying to get attention, but there was nothing on the floor, and it was right behind. It wasn't even the other end of the room, or in the next room. It was right behind us, and we couldn't find anything that it could have been.
Right.
So we had a table with us, and we said, okay, so something's going on in here. Let's do table work. So we got the table, and we were just going towards it to touch it.
This is where we moved, isn't it?
Was it in the same room?
Oh, we moved into the next room.
Yes, it was the same block, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
So we got the table out, ready, and went towards it to touch it, and it started moving straight away.
Okay.
Nobody was touching it.
Right.
No.
Tapping from underneath the table, loud tapping from underneath. And
wow.
Of course, you look underneath the table, don't you? You think, what's going on? Nothing underneath the table. It was bizarre. And on top of the table it started. And before we hadn't started any kind of investigation as such.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any questions, have we?
No.
That's not what it felt like. They were just waiting.
Yeah.
No questions asked or anything. And then we started asking questions, naturally then. But before we'd even asked anything, things were happening. And it was just one of those small fold-up tables as well. It was nothing that we'd brought, the group had brought. It wasn't anything set up or it was portable.
Mm-hmm.
But, so we said, let's record this. So as soon as the recorders go on, it stops
right.
instantly.
So did you manage to capture any sort of recorded evidence or any voices or anything like that?
No video evidence, because as soon as we started, it stopped.
Right.
And you put them away. Sorry, go on.
Every time.
Yeah.
I tried to video it. Every single time, just stopped, like, straight away. Didn't want videoing, didn't want recording.
No.
Do you know, I almost, and I mean, this is pure conjecture here, but if they had come from somewhere that had become a Soviet-run state, that would probably be an immediate sort of, oops, no, this is evidence, we can't. If they've had that sort of ingrained into them, even if it was only for a short while, they might be terrified of something being used against them, I suppose, if it was their first experience of being able to interact with living beings. Because I just wonder if the bulk of the energy from this place is to do with the Polish side, because as an army camp, it was only really an army anti-aircraft thing for about 2 years, and yes, there would have been a lot of deaths and everything else. I'm not disputing that, but it was almost like a transition camp for them. They didn't spend that much time there. It's not like the air bases you get, sort of the US Air Force air bases, when they would have been stationed there permanently unless something had happened to them. I mean, the only other bit could have been those who trained there sort of after the Polish community was resettled. I suppose you would have had some of them who would have been going, Northern Ireland and horrible places like that to fight in. They may have, but to me, it kind of, and some of the stuff you're saying to me almost sounds cheeky, kind of inquisitive, like children would be.
Funny you say that, because when we moved on, because it's just amazing to walk through. It's in the woods. But a lot of it is in the woods. So you're walking through the woods in the middle of the night, and it just feels like you're just in the middle of nowhere. And then to the building, and one of the buildings we went in, we got the table again, because that seemed to be a way that was of communicating that night. We got the same again, but when we asked questions, it appeared to be a little boy that was trying to communicate with us. So you say about children, it was it appeared to be a little boy. So all the questions that we asked were sort of answered intelligently, and taps and things like that. But we heard. Do you remember, Pamela, in the other room? We heard that voice. Everybody heard that voice, like a really gruff voice. And somebody went running off and screamed over it. But we really in the other room, and the energy changed, and it went dark. Dark, horrible.
Well, they did have schools on these places for the Polish children. Yeah. Because they tried to make it as normal as possible for them. They also would turn one of the Nissen huts into a chapel, because a lot of them were very, very staunch Roman Catholics. So they, it could have been like the priest, or it could have been a school teacher. It could, that kind of strictness that people get a bit phased by, I suppose, for want of a better term. But I was reading an account of a person who was born there and spent the first sort of 15 years of her life living on the camp. And she said it was great, because there were so many other kids and we could all socialise, and, we didn't know any different. We were Polish, but we just happened to have been born in England, but we were still Polish as far as we were concerned. And my parents sort of sheltered us from what we'd gone through and the fact that we were stateless. But she said it was great fun, and we had a shop on site that we would go to for our groceries, and we went to school, and we had, parks that play areas, playgrounds that they could go to, and everything else. So it almost was a town in its own...
its own right.
What I do wonder is how much it was kind of ostracised by the locals. Suspicion of foreigners, especially post World War II, living just up the road from them. I wonder, most of these sites, because I was looking up quite a few of them, they were placed in the middle of nowhere, so they didn't interfere with local infrastructure, which I find quite sort of unpalatable, I suppose, for want of a better term.
Yeah, like meant to be kept away from everybody else.
It wasn't an easy existence either. Sort of reading the description, they didn't. I mean, I don't know. You've probably been in a Nissen hut. You know what they're like. I mean, and Jeanette, you'll work with the air cadets. I'm sure you've experienced the old-fashioned World War II Nissen huts in your sort of hobby. I suppose you could call it, whatever you call it. They're not the most well insulated of places, are they? They're not the most sort of comfortable of places to be in. And all they had were those iron sort of, the iron fires the cylindrical sort of stove fire that had that's all they had per hut. They'd have to share it. The two families would have to share one heater to cook, to heat, to do anything on. And you just think, that must have been so hard.
Yeah,
so hard.
But they probably just got on with it and didn't think, they were hard done by or anything like that. Got on with it, won't they? Because that's what they were used to, and that's what they were given. So, and they probably just made a best of what they'd got. I think.
So you're saying you experienced shadow figures, sort of shadow play, and just anyone who's listening thinks I've talked to the girls about this beforehand. I haven't. The child thing was what I was thinking, and so we hadn't actually discussed that before we started recording at all. It was just the impression I got that it sounded quite playful what was happening to them, and I know that they were children living there when it was a resettlement camp. You had this gruff voice that was heard. Could anyone tell the language the voice was speaking, or is it more sort of, a Witcher type noise, like a type noise? You know what I mean? That's the only thing I can think of right now.
It was really that kind of a thing. Yeah, it didn't seem to be words or of any kind of any language really. The loud gruff noise, but it was the way the energy changed and everything felt darker. Not a good energy. It felt like bad energy.
Okay.
Whoever was there didn't want us to be there, or didn't want the little boy to be communicating with us for whatever reason.
Right.
Because it pretty much did stop after that.
Right.
And we all left that room and went back in again a bit later on.
Okay.
But because it felt like when you think, right, we shouldn't be here for the time being. We're not ones. None of us are ones to, run away from a situation or anything like that. But you're there to communicate. You're there to find things out. But there's times when you know that it's right just to leave that area and sort of calm down a bit before you go into them. I think most paranormal investigators would say the same. Yeah, you trust on your instincts, and
you trust your gut. Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely
it feels right.
Yeah,
we usually tend to feel the same about situations as well. We have the same kind of feelings about them. It's not one will agree and one will disagree. We're like, right, okay, so this isn't right, and we'll both feel the same about.
Even Chris said it, didn't he? And Chris, who was running it, said, right, we shouldn't be in here for now. No, acting scared. We were just like, no, we shouldn't be in here for now.
Okay.
We'll go out.
Because a lot of the buildings that are there now, the ones I've seen on the pictures, so I haven't had the pleasure of going there yet, they're the 1980s constructions. You can see that from the brickwork. They're not 1940s or 1950s. How many of the 1940s and 1950s buildings are still there?
There wasn't so many, was there?
No.
Any, really. I would say they were mostly 80s buildings.
Right.
We covered a big area. Like you say, it's vast.
Yeah,
and that's just one part of it that you were covering. You imagine the size of it in its day.
Yeah, we walked a lot, didn't we? And the whole thing must be unreal. I'd love to look around the entire thing.
About 70 acres, isn't it? In the area that's let out to about 17 acres. But we didn't get that.
I do know one of the other bits is where I think it's the Blackshaw Moor Caravan Club site is, which. I don't own a caravan, but I know people who do. I might have to cajole one of them into letting me borrow their caravan so I can visit it or something and go walk about. Because they do actually have some memorials to the Polish people who were there on that particular part. But it does make you think how big. But this goes with a lot of these type of these sort of war camps. I mean, when people go to somewhere like the air base that I covered in my second book, it looks tiny, but when you start looking at the blueprint of the map of how far it actually covered in its day, it was huge. These places weren't just a few acres of huts and things. They were entire infrastructures built to cope with the people who were living there.
No, yeah. I mean, we didn't see any Nissan. There was no Nissan huts, was there? We didn't go on any.
Not that we were there. I mean, there probably are, but in the area we were allowed in, so unfortunately.
Yeah, it was mostly the 80s buildings, but I mean, the energy will still be there.
Definitely.
Wasn't it?
So were there any areas of it that did, I mean, you were saying this area that you'd suddenly thought, right, no, we've got to leave, we're not welcome now, we're not in danger, but it's a bit like when you warn your welcome out somewhere and they're like, right, we want to go to bed now, go on, go away, go home. Were there any areas, though, that did feel a bit like, this could turn nasty?
That one, really, and I'm
Just
not even sure. kind of area? Well, that was the one that felt like it could turn nasty. Yeah.
The only thing, the rest was just playful and quite intense. Intense, playful at the same time. And, yeah.
Like they were just as inquisitive about us as we were about them. But that's the only place that we felt like, we shouldn't be here. And it was a dark, dark energy. It wasn't nice at all. That was the only area. Everywhere else, and we got so much. And it sounds, people say you never get that much activity in one place in one night, but we did in that place. We did. It was just from start to finish. It was one of the most intense in terms of activity placing, apart from East Drive, that we've ever been, to get that much in energy in one night, activity in one night. It was wasn't it, Pamela, from start to finish, really? I mean, there was some places you went and nothing. Some places you went and nothing. But in terms of the few hours that we were there, there was an awful lot.
The minute we walked in, when it felt, when we felt the energy, there's bits in between that weren't, but there was a lot going on all through. There wasn't too many lulls, was there, really?
No, because different people split into different groups, and different people got different things, didn't they? Like, one of our friends went off and did a Ouija board with some other people, and they got quite a lot of things coming through that. And some of us did the table tipping, and we got a lot from that. And just various things. Sometimes you just a bit of a seance, or people did different things. But everybody came back and said that, they'd got something. Everybody came from different areas, doing different things, and had some sort of interaction, be it just small or intense. Yeah, but everybody got something, and it was just amazing.
It would be interesting to see what it's like now, because more do it now. So it'd be interesting to see whether the activity stayed the same, or whether it was just that night, like they were waiting for us to come.
Isn't it?
But that's always a really interesting thing to debate, isn't it? Because we do sometimes say certain areas are being overdone. They're doing too many investigations there without the control over who's doing the investigation. I know places like Richard Estette was talking about it recently, about Veliska, the axe murderer's house. And he was somebody was criticising him, because that's one of the books he's working on at the moment, and somebody criticised him, saying, you've got to leave those poor children be, they were murdered, blah blah blah. And he said, but you're assuming that's who's talking to us. You're assuming it's the spirits of the children who are coming through, or even the parents, or even the murderer himself. Whereas he was saying that Johnny Hauser, the brilliant Johnny Hauser, who kind of manages the place, said he thinks it's other things that have been brought in that are communicating, because he's found so many discarded Ouija boards there. Apparently there was a YouTube video where some people bought pig's blood in to try and stimulate activity, which I think is disgusting. And he said you can't guarantee who it is you're talking to. So you get that lack of control in a place. You are... I'm not one of those people who believes a Ouija board is a portal to Satan and everything else. I think it's no more of a portal to Satan than a spirit box or a medium or anything else. It's just, at the end of the day, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Exactly. But I do think that with a lot of places that are highly you can't control what groups are doing. And even though in places like Drakelow have banned certain groups for experiments they find out that they're conducting there that are potentially not satanic or whatever. But even then, I know a few Satanists. That's not they don't do sacrifices and all that kind of thing. It's all these people who want to be summon a demon or whatever. Well, you can do that anyway. You don't need to be in Drakelow Tunnels or the Veliska house or whatever to do it. So, but then the other part of me thinks, well, perhaps all these people coming through, all that energy helps the battery for the spirits that are there, and it's knowing. Is it that you can get good energy? I mean, you can get good and bad energy, but is it that there's good visitor energy? And is there bad energy that saps the spirits because they have to work twice as hard? Or is it like when you meet some people and you know that it's just hard bloody work to have a conversation with them, and yet other people you can be talking for 3 hours and you don't realise you've been. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I believe that's true, because with that many people coming through, it creates a lot of energy, doesn't it? However the energy is, so it's got to stimulate something. I believe. Yeah, I do. It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, like Penny just said, charging the battery, and it's a good way of putting it. It's a very good way to put it there.
Thank you. But it's whether it's, like I say, the analogy I've just thought of is when you meet someone and you chat for like 3 or 4 hours and like, oh my gosh, we've been talking for 3 or 4 hours. It was easy. It builds you. It gives you that, like, you're tired at the end of it, but in a good way. But then there's other conversations you have where it's literally like, oh wow, I've got to think of something to say. You know what I'm saying? And I'm wondering if that kind of energy is what's bad for the spirits, when they're feeling like, well, I've got nothing here to bounce off. I've got no rapport going here. And obviously we'll never know. And I'm just surmising. But you know, when people say someone's been over investigated, it kind of goes against the whole, well, they need the human energy to do so. It's going to be interesting, some of the places now that are starting to reopen that have been shut for 6-7 months. Is that going to get more activity, or is it going to take a while for the energy to build again to get the level? I mean, I think Drakelow Tunnels is still pretty active from what people have told me.
Back there.
But that one I think has a geological sort of complex to it. It's going to be interesting to say with Bodmin Jail when that reopens in October, if that's going to still have the same level of, with all the building work that's gone on, and you're going to have people actually staying there in the hotel. Is that going to give it a whole new? But it's because nobody knows. I know there's people who do have a theory on it, but nobody knows for sure. And it is interesting if you go somewhere that, you know, like you're saying, they seem to want to interact. They seem to be desperate to talk to someone. Is it because everything that had happened there from the sort of the 80s onwards, all the battle games, war games or whatever, has created this kind of buzz, and they've been sort of literally knocking on the door saying, come on, we need to talk to someone. We want to tell you what we went through. We want to show you. And, you know, everyone's had blinkers on and not heard them. And then as soon as a group like yourself go in and say, well, we're here, we want to hear you, they're all sort of desperate to get their point across.
Trying to come through at once, perhaps, and you know, ways. It's a very interesting theory, but some places, like you say, it depends. Some places you think they must get fed up of people coming and asking the same questions all the time, but then if they are, surely they just wouldn't come through. If they're fed up, they won't come through an answer, will they? So I do think a lot of people passing through can create a lot of energy, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what do you find with somewhere like Lancaster Castle is your baby? We'll talk about that for a second. That's your baby, Lancaster Castle. Fascinating place. My husband is adamant he's been there before, and I've told him, well, I've never taken you there. And it would only probably been me that would take him up to Lancashire, because he'd never been to Lancashire until he met me 17 years ago. So I'm wondering past life. You know, maybe he was locked up there once. I don't know, but he's adamant he's been there. We were watching, I think it was Dan Jones' episode on it on British castles, and he was like, "I've been there. We've been there." And I was like, "I promise you, we haven't been to Lancaster Castle. Never taken you to Lancaster." Do you find the energy there differs on how busy it's been as a tourist venue?
It can do. I think, for me, I think the energy differs as to who you are. I think we've found that some of the spirits seem to remember you. And they seem to pick out a certain person that they like, and they'll remember that person from the different investigations we've done. Would you agree, Pamela?
Say so, yes. It was Hans that wanted you in his cell remembers you.
Yeah. He remembered me again, another time, trying to drag me in his cell.
Ooh la la.
But I seem to be remembered. So, yeah, I think it's more a case of that. And that's another, like you were saying about Bob in jail and all the work that's been done. Lancaster Castle has been having an awful lot of work done recently. An awful lot. It's been
for almost a year.
Yeah, for almost a year. And then it was about to reopen and COVID hit. So it's been closed all that time. Now, you still can't go in and go around it yet. You can't do the tours or anything. You can just go walk around the outside and go to the cafe. So is that going to have an impact? The fact that there's so much work being done there and then it's been closed a long time and there's been nobody going through, is that going to have an impact when it opens? Are they going to be clamouring to talk to you, or is it going to take a while to build the energy, or is the work going to have stirred them up? Is it going to be different? Will he remember you? Will he not remember you because there's different spirits, or it's been a long time? It's going to be very, very interesting.
Maybe your spirit will two-time you, though. He'll be so desperate for someone to pull into his cell, he'll pull anyone in who walks past.
Yeah, you never know. I think he likes swans, though.
Oh, I'll be right then.
You've got to get there. If Wayne's been there, we can go somewhere else and you can go up to Ealing.
Yeah. It was weird, actually. The husband, he's adamant. He's been there, and I was like, nope, I've never taken you. And I checked with his parents. Nope, we've never been to Lancashire. So it's got to be some kind of past life thing. Because he's adamant. He's determined. Really? And I was like, no, mate, I promise you, I have never taken you to Lancaster Castle. And to me, it doesn't look like any of the other castles I've sort of taken him to when we've gone touring the UK. So who knows?
It'd be then to see if he feels anything when he walks into the place. Really interesting, that.
Definitely.
Is he sensitive that way? Is he?
He's getting more that way. He never used to be, but because he's done a few investigations with me, and he's starting to pick up on things, and he's still. I mean, he's not as sensitive as me, no. But then again, I've been doing it for a long time, and I always have had that ability. But he is starting to get the "who's behind me" sort of feeling that sometimes you get. But he's not. He's got to the stage now. He's like, if he picks up on something, he's not embarrassed to say there's something weird happening here. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if he sort of. But he was just adamant. Even as the program went on, he was like, "We've been there. We've looked round there," and I was like, "We haven't. I promise you, we haven't." So yeah, it was. And he was sober when he was saying all this as well, so it wasn't that he was drunk and just argumentative. But I mean, somewhere like Anzio, he would enjoy because of the whole sort of outdoorsy military, type thing. And coming back to Anzio, I mean, you were saying that it didn't disappoint. No. I have not heard a single person say Anzio. It's a joke. There's nothing there. Every single person I know who's gone there has said it's in my top 5.
Wow!
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's good.
So it's got to have something going on. Now, are you guys planning on going back there at some point when you can?
Yes. Yeah, we'd like to.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you get to go before I do, I want you to do a little experiment for me. I want you to learn a few phrases in Polish.
Yeah.
And speak them and see if anything comes, like, hi, my name is, or how are you, that kind of thing. And see if that generates anything, because that would interest me to see if it is the Polish connection that is causing a lot of the sort of the energy.
Yeah, I think it is. I do. We felt it was, didn't we? We felt it was more civilians than army that were coming through. You know, you just... When you're sensitive, you get the feeling, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes, who they are, and we did feel it was more of the Polish community. When we did Prevalia, we learnt some Italian phrases because naturally they were Italians, most of them. So we learnt some Italian phrases, and we got quite a bit of feedback from that. So it's would definitely be worth learning Polish phrases and using Anzio.
I mean, triggers to me are so, I know I talk about it a lot. I've talked about it every single interview I've done for about last year. I think triggers are such a powerful thing because they don't have to be disrespectful. No. In fact, I prefer they aren't. I mean, the people taking blood into a murder site to me is just not right. They don't have to be
No.
disrespectful. They don't have to cost anything either. You don't have to go in with like expensive antiques and all that kind of thing. You just need to use your imagination. And I would have thought, hearing your language being spoken, when you've been so used to having to communicate in a different language, because they were taught English, they did have English lessons, so that they could integrate with the local population. But I would have thought hearing your mother tongue spoken would make you go, "Oh, hello," and I think that one would be a really, really good. It would be a good sort of trigger to use.
If we go there before you, we will do that for you.
Sure.
And then come back and talk about it again.
Thank you. Yes, it's something that I was writing down little things that I would possibly look at doing. I mean, I know that, for example, a lot of the work that the men ended up doing when they went into the coal industry and worked in the quarries, the women went to work in the pottery industry. Unsurprising, really, how close you are to Stoke, and you're in Staffordshire. They did integrate into society, but again, they got moved to an estate that was almost built specifically for them in the north of the county. They didn't, but it's why Staffordshire did have a high Polish sort of content, if you like, in the 50s and 60s. But I do sort of, I do get that gut feeling. It's a lot of Polish.
Yeah.
So, do you know the people who were doing, say, the Ouija board? Did they mention anything that came up?
What was it she said? Remember?
No, I can't.
What they said to her? Because it's such a long time ago now. It feels like. Is it got 3 years?
To 3 years, yeah.
But she would remember.
It made that much of an impact on her.
Yeah, it wasn't names or anything like that. It was just answers. Didn't get any names, which would have been good. But it was just answers to the questions. But it did make it. She's a big fan of the Ouija board, isn't she? Or was?
Yeah.
And it did make a big impact on her. So
To be honest, with names, if you've ever seen some of the Polish names, they do look just like loads of Z's and W's and C's and S's. You wouldn't know it's and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any Polish listeners, because I know what you guys have been through. It's harsh, but the names you may not realise. It's a bit like when I've had a Russian name come through. I had to write it down and then double check it was actually a name, because it looked just like a jumble of letters. But when you actually spoke to someone who spoke Russian, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's a common name. It's blah, blah, blah." So it could even have been that. It's I think as well, like, remembering the fact it was called Blackshaw Moor, remembering the fact that all these people lived there for 20 odd years. That to me, and then if you're investigating it to sort of you can keep their memory alive, and that's a good way of sort of giving them respect for having dealt with what they dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah, and if they want to come through, if they're wanting to communicate so badly, then that's a good thing, I think, because they're wanting to keep that memory alive. Surely they're wanting to keep that memory alive. They're wanting to tell their story, and they're wanting to let you they're around, and they're wanting to know who you are as well.
Yeah.
Why I think there was such a lot of presence in the first part, just standing round and watching us and trying to find out about us rather than finding out about them, I think.
Yeah.
Because
sorry, go on.
It's quite daunting, wouldn't it, having new people suddenly coming in, especially English people, and they weren't, like you say, they didn't get to interact with them all at first, and a load of English people come in and sort of talking amongst themselves at first and then talking at them. It could have been quite daunting for them.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
See, if they're still stuck in that time frame, if they are in the time frame they were in, and then all these English people come in, that must be confusing to them. Who are all these people that have come into our home?
Yeah, possibly. Possibly, especially if they hadn't seen the soldiers. Although I'm wondering if when you've got loads, if they've gone away from a scary situation where they were from, and to them, soldiers aren't necessarily good. They then see a load of soldiers coming in, sort of 5 years after they've left and onwards. That might have been why they were sort of so like, oh, these people out of uniform. Do you know what I mean? That kind of they felt safe again because you were civilians, you weren't wearing uniforms, you didn't have guns, you weren't sort of yelling instructions at each other, which is
asking questions with respect to, we were.
Almost everybody on that investigation that night seemed to be that way out, didn't they? There was quite a lot of people, but then they were all split into smaller groups. Yeah. But in the first part, when we were all doing the séance, as it were, I don't remember anybody being disrespectful. Everyone was quite nicely, putting things out there.
Yeah.
There was nobody that was, because sometimes you get somebody in a big group that's a bit, don't you? But everybody was being pretty respectful, really. So that maybe was what put them at ease and then made them want to start communicating so intensely. It was, however it was and whatever it was a great experience.
Wow.
It really was.
Wow, well, you made me want to go. It's been on my top 5 for a while to want to go to, and I want to go even more now. Definitely want to get, if nothing else, is to sort of pay my respect, because some of them were Allied soldiers, some of them would have been Allied airmen and everything else, and we do have a huge debt to pay to them, whether people realise it or not. I mean, my knowledge of the army side of things isn't as hot as my knowledge of the Air Force, but you only have to look at the Battle of Britain memorials to see how many Polish airmen we have.
Our squadron at the ATC, our squadron was all the Polish that came there.
Oh, wow.
It was a Polish base. Yeah, I feel like, they're still around, some of them.
Yep, definitely. Well, there's one other sort of thing about that area which I found quite fascinating. It's the only site, and this is literally a few miles from the camp, it's the only site to have a story of a inland mermaid.
Oh,
did you know that one?
No.
Apparently there is a body of water nearby called a Blackmere Pool, and there is meant to be a rather jarred off mermaid living there. And there's 2 stories. One is that she was brought in by a sailor who lived in Thorncliffe, and he put her in the water so he could carry on seeing her, and he died, and there was no way she could return home, so now she haunts the pool. That's one story. The other story, to me, is a lot more feasible, although I haven't verified either of these. I will say these are myths. She, this young woman who was rejected by someone by the name of, who rejected, a local guy by the name of Joshua Linnett. He was a bit annoyed that she wouldn't accept his romancing and declared her a witch, and so she was drowned in the pool for being a witch. And she became, they call it a demon mermaid, and basically if you go in that water and she doesn't like you, she'll drown you. And that's just nearby.
Wow. Well, I'd like to find where that spot is.
Yes.
Yeah, Blackmere Pool, it's called. But yes, it's meant to have its own inland mermaid story.
Wow. Interesting.
There's also meant to be the typical headless horseman galloping across the moor, which every moor seems to have a headless horseman. But I've not heard of many mermaid stories to that effect. No.
There is a pub called the Mermaid, isn't there?
There is the Mermaid Inn now. Oh, it's funny you should mention that. It's not actually a pub anymore. You hire it for like a massive sort of. It's not a hotel. I think you can have 30 odd people staying there at any one time. It's stunning. For you guys, for you, Pamela, it would be a bit of a busman's holiday because it's in the middle of nowhere. I was looking it up. It looks beautiful. It looks absolutely stunning. You're in the middle of nowhere. All these views across the moors. Apparently, you're only a 10-minute walk to the Blackmere Pool, and I was thinking that would be great for a group of people for a weekend. The stuff you could.
Road trip.
It's lovely. Yeah, road trip, definitely.
Yeah.
But it looks I don't think Staffordshire isn't one that people tend to think of that much as being sort of full of stories, but just starting to look at some of them for this particular show, I was finding loads of legends about the area of Staffordshire, and because it's just on the Peak District, edge of the Peak District as well. Yeah. And it looks absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Definitely. That's another one. You see, the list, the Spooky Sisters list is just, it's ridiculously long now. Every time we hear something else, it goes on the bucket list. So we're going to be very, very busy. There's so many places in the US on that list, and so many places here, and we just keep adding to it.
Well, I must admit, though, that one I put up today on the Haunted Histories Facebook page, the one in Poland, that castle in Poland. I mean, that's a hotel. You can stay in it, and it's like something out of a fairy tale. And you know, I think you're about 3 hours drive there from Auschwitz as well, and looking at all, they're like Russia and all these sort of Eastern European countries that you can now access. And I'm looking at all these buildings, thinking what I would give to spend a few nights in there and see what the vibe is, and even just dig into the history of them. And it's I mean, I had 3 or 4 that I was due to do this year that were bucket list ones, and they all obviously got postponed, like everyone's did. But it's one of the problems of doing this show and doing Haunted Histories. I speak to all over the world, and I'm just like, I need to get a private pilot's license, and I need to be able to fly myself everywhere, because this is getting ridiculous.
You can take us then.
There's no cabin service. You have to serve yourself.
Oh, come on.
I'm going to be a bit busy flying.
Oh, well, you can't get the staff, can you?
Well, wouldn't you rather us flying the plane than serving you a beer?
I guess so, as long as there's a fridge on board, I can get my own beer out the fridge.
That's fine. Yes, it will be stocked on Penny Airlines. Yes, don't worry. Haunted History Airlines, I suppose it should be called. Yeah, so have you guys got anything penciled in for the next sort of 12 months, investigation-wise?
Yeah, well, in November, we're supposed to be hosting an event at what's called the North Euston Hotel in Fleetwood, which isn't too far from me. That's penciled in. We're doing that for our friend Stephen. We're hoping it's still going ahead. As far as we know, you can't tell at the moment because of everything that's going on. You don't know how it's going to go, but we do have that penciled in. That's an event we'll be running.
Lytham Hall as a ghost tour for several events.
Lytham Hall, and we're looking at going to the Dana in Shrewsbury prison, aren't we? Right. We were just looking at that today. There's a thing you can go. You get a 2.5 hour sort of tour,
right?
And then you get to sleep in a prison cell overnight, and you get to investigate of your own free will from 12 till 6.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
We are looking into that at the moment. We were looking at it today. You just discovered it today, Pamela, looking at that.
Yes. Yeah.
And then early next year, hopefully, we were supposed to be going to Drakelow Tunnels in April with MJ Dixon and a few fellow investigators, and obviously that didn't go ahead. So that's scheduled for early next year. So I can't wait for that, because Drakelow Tunnels is just...
You've done Drakelow before, have you?
Yes, a couple of times. Yeah, and it was one of those places you just need to go back to.
Yeah.
We've hosted a couple of events there when we were with Ghost Followers, and we've been 3 times, haven't we? Because we've been on.
Yeah. So that's one of my favourite locations to visit, I must admit.
Awesome. We're also hoping, if they open the borders next year, to do a paranormal explore road trip in the Isle of Man as well.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good.
Ancient, lots of lore and history, and
and a bit of urbex as well.
Say what? Sorry.
Bit of urbexing as well while we're there, possibly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to hear your enthusiasm hasn't waned. We've been on lockdown. I must admit, I've got to start planning some places as well. So you never know, our paths may cross.
Yes.
At some point in the future. Hopefully, we won't have any family emergencies next time we're in the same county.
Yeah. Not foresee these things, can you? But you have to come to Lancaster Castle anyway.
Definitely.
Find out.
Yeah. So I'm not sure when we'll get to do it, because obviously nobody knows what's going on at the moment.
can't plan too deeply, can you, at the minute?
No, everything's got to have, everything's got to be 100% cancellation proof and everything else, because you just don't know, which is very, very hard for businesses trying to keep running. And I do really, really feel for a lot of the businesses out there trying to sort of keep staff employed and everything else when they just don't know what's around the corner. But again, thank you ever so much, ladies, for being my guests tonight. I have to say, well done to Jeanette for mastering Skype.
Thank you. Technophobe over here.
You got there now. You're fine. You're flying now. It's easy, isn't it?
Yeah, easy.
It is easy. At least you're not at my end trying to work out how to get all the sounds to linking in with different systems and everything else. That's when it starts to get a bit like, ah!
I mean, too much food just yet.
And enjoy your quarantining, Pamela, even though I think you've just been announced you don't have to quarantine anymore, so you can go on lots of lovely walks.
Still be very careful, but I've been having walks, but not, not socialising with anybody since.
Well, who wants to see people? Who wants
to
see
like
people?
Socialising anyway.
See that face? I want to see my sister.
Oh, well, sisters aren't people, are they? But just people in general. Yeah, who wants to do people? Anyway, well, thank you ever so much, ladies. It's been a pleasure as always. It's always a pleasure talking to the Spooky Sisters, even though they told me off recently for the fact I'd signed a book, Stay Spooky, and apparently that's their line, but they've agreed I can borrow it every so often.
You're like, well, you know you.
You're loud.
You've got to have a laugh in these days, haven't you? You've got to laugh at something. So thank you ever so much, ladies. It's been a pleasure as always. So that's been Anzio. That's been Anzio Camp, or should I say Blackshaw Moor Camp, if you want to be accurate. I hope it makes you want to go and visit it. If it does, check out one of the groups that are doing investigations there. There are still a few who are starting up again their investigations, because being the size it is, they can actually separate people. So do check that out. I've got more shows coming up this year, as you can probably imagine. I'm not going to tell you who they're with yet, because it's a surprise for you. But there are definitely more shows. Do check out the Haunted Histories page, do check out the website, any of the YouTube videos that go up, and just let me know what you think, and let me know if there's anything you want the Haunted Histories treatment on. But on that note, I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell and say have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.